I didn't expect one question to change the way I looked at my marriage forever. It wasn't asked in anger, or during a fight, or even in a moment of suspicion. It came out quietly, almost gently, the kind of question you ask when you're tired of pretending everything is fine. From the outside, we looked like we had it all together. We had been married long enough to understand each other's routines, long enough to move through life without needing to explain every little thing. There were no loud arguments, no dramatic exits, no obvious signs of something being wrong. That's what made it harder to understand why something felt off. That it wasn't one big thing. It was small, almost invisible changes. The way he stopped looking at me when I spoke. The way conversations became shorter, reduced to practical exchanges. What used to be laughter turned into silence filled with nothing. He was there, physically, but something about him felt absent. At first, I told myself it was normal. People change. Marriages settle. Not everything can stay exciting forever. I convinced myself that comfort sometimes looks like distance. But the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it grew stronger, sharper, like a quiet voice that refused to be ignored. That I started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. His phone, always within reach, always turned slightly away. The way he would smile at something on the screen, a soft, private smile I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. The way he became more patient with strangers than he was with me. Still, I said nothing. Because saying something would mean admitting that I was afraid. And I wasn't ready to face what that fear might mean. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between us became something I could feel even when we were sitting next to each other. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was quiet, like a slow fading. And somehow, that made it worse. That I started questioning myself instead. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe this was just what marriage looked like after a while. But deep down, I knew the difference between comfort and disconnection. And this wasn't comfort. One night, everything felt heavier than usual. There was no argument, no trigger, nothing specific that pushed me to that point. Just a quiet exhaustion from carrying thoughts I hadn't spoken out loud. We were sitting together, but it felt like we were miles apart. That I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to find something familiar in his expression. Something that reminded me of how things used to be. But all I saw was someone who seemed distant, almost guarded, like there were parts of his life I no longer had access to. And in that moment, the question came to me. Not planned, not rehearsed. Just honest. Are you still in love with me? It hung in the air between us, simple and direct. For a second, I almost wished I could take it back. Not because I didn't want the answer, but because I was suddenly aware of how much depended on it. That he didn't respond right away. That was the first thing that felt wrong. That if everything was fine, the answer would have come easily. Without hesitation, without thought. But instead, there was silence. Not the comfortable kind, but the kind that stretches too long, the kind that makes your chest tighten. That he looked at me, but not in the way I expected. There was something in his eyes I couldn't quite name. Not anger, not confusion. Something closer to uncertainty, and that uncertainty said more than any words could have. That I felt it before he even spoke. That quiet shift, like something inside me was already preparing for the truth. My mind started connecting pieces I had been ignoring for weeks. The distance, the silence, the subtle changes. All of it suddenly felt less like coincidence and more like a pattern. When he finally exhaled, it wasn't with relief. It was heavy, like the weight of something he didn't want to say. I don't know, he said, not yes. Not even a reassuring lie. Just uncertainty. That I in that moment, something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet realization settling in. Because it wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it. The hesitation. The lack of urgency to reassure me. The absence of something that should have been instinctive. That I nodded, even though I didn't fully understand what I was agreeing to. Maybe I was trying to stay calm. Maybe I was trying to hold on to whatever was left of us in that moment, but deep down, I knew something had changed. That question wasn't supposed to create distance. It was supposed to bring clarity, maybe even closeness. But instead, it revealed something I hadn't been ready to see, and as I sat there, pretending everything was still normal, I realized that the silence after my question had already given me an answer I couldn't ignore. The silence didn't end when he answered. If anything, it settled deeper, heavier, like something had finally surfaced and refused to go back down. I thought hearing, "I don't know," would push me to react, to demand clarity, to feel something sharp and immediate. But it didn't. It left me suspended in a space that felt worse than the truth, because uncertainty has a way of stretching pain that I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse him. I just looked at him, waiting, hoping he would correct himself, that he would realize what he had just said and take it back. But he didn't. He just sat there, like he had already said enough. That's when I understood something I had been avoiding. People don't hesitate when they're sure. And the fact that he couldn't give me a simple answer meant that somewhere along the way, he had already started letting go. What does that mean? I asked quietly. He rubbed his hands together, avoiding my eyes for a moment before finally looking back at me. It means, things haven't felt the same for a while. There it was. Not a confession, not yet. Just the beginning of one that I felt a tightness in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. For you, or for us? He hesitated again, and that hesitation was starting to feel familiar in a way I didn't like. For me, he said, that should have made it easier. At least it was honest. But instead, it made everything heavier. Because now it wasn't about misunderstanding or miscommunication. It was about something inside him that had already shifted, something I hadn't been part of. I thought back to all the moments I had questioned myself, all the times I told myself I was overthinking. The late replies, the distracted conversations, the way he seemed present but not really there. None of it felt small anymore. How long? I asked. He didn't answer right away. His silence this time felt like he was measuring the damage his words could do. I don't know exactly, he said, but it sounded like he did. A few months, maybe longer. Months, the word echoed in my mind, louder than anything else he had said. Because months meant this wasn't sudden. It wasn't a bad week or a rough phase. It was something that had been growing quietly while I was still trying to hold everything together. Why didn't you say anything? My voice came out softer than I expected. He let out a breath, almost like he had been waiting for that question. I didn't want to hurt you. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. So this is better? He didn't respond. And that silence felt like an answer too. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could feel everything shifting, piece by piece, like the version of our marriage I believed in was slowly being replaced by something I didn't recognize. Then I asked the question I wasn't sure I wanted the answer to: is there someone else? This time, the silence wasn't hesitation. It was confirmation. He looked away, and that was enough. He didn't need to say it. The way his posture changed, the way his jaw tightened slightly, it all told me what I already knew, but I needed to hear it. Just tell me the truth, I said. He nodded slowly, like he had accepted that there was no way around it anymore. There's someone I've been talking to. Talking, the word felt carefully chosen. Controlled. Safe. How long? I asked again, even though I wasn't sure I wanted a number. A couple of months. The same time frame. The same quiet overlap between when I started feeling something was wrong and when something actually was. Does she know about me? He nodded. Yes. That hurt more than I expected. Not because I cared about her, but because it meant this wasn't hidden in the way I imagined. It existed openly in a space where I was the only one unaware. And what is it? I asked. Just talking. He hesitated again, and I felt something inside me sink. It didn't start as anything, he said. It just happened. That wasn't an answer. It was an excuse. I looked at him, really looked this time, trying to understand how someone I had shared so much with could sit in front of me and feel like a stranger. You smiled at your phone, I said quietly. You stopped talking to me. You checked out long before you admitted anything. That doesn't just happen. He didn't argue. He didn't deny it. And somehow, that made it worse. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he added, like that would soften the reality, but it didn't. Because it already had. I leaned back slightly, feeling a strange calm settling in. Not peace, not acceptance. Just clarity. The kind that comes when everything you've been questioning finally lines up. All the small things I ignored suddenly made sense. The distance, the silence, the way he became someone I couldn't quite reach anymore. It wasn't in my head. It was real, and the hardest part wasn't even the fact that there was someone else. It was realizing that he had been building something with her while letting what we had slowly fall apart. You could have told me, I said, more to myself than to him. I know, he replied, but there was no urgency in it. Just acknowledgement that that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about timing. About all the moments where the truth could have been spoken but wasn't. About how I had been trying to fix something he had already stopped choosing. That I looked down for a moment, then back at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel confused. I wasn't asking the wrong question, I said quietly. That he frowned slightly, like he didn't understand. I just asked it too late. And as those words settled between us, I realized the truth hadn't just come out in his answers. It had been there all along, in everything he didn't say before. Something inside me went quiet after that. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful, but the kind that replaces chaos when your mind finally stops expecting things to make sense. I wasn't shocked anymore. I wasn't even asking myself why. I had already crossed that part. What I felt now was heavier, clearer. That I stopped looking at him like someone I needed answers from. I started looking at him like someone who had already given me all of them. Is that all? I asked, my voice steady. That he looked confused. What do you mean? I mean, is it just talking, or is there more you haven't said yet? For a second, it felt like he was deciding how much truth I could handle. That alone told me everything about where we stood. Truth wasn't something we shared anymore. It was something he managed. There's nothing serious, he said. It's not like that. I held his gaze, not reacting, just waiting. Because I had learned something important in the last few minutes. If you give silence enough space, people fill it with honesty. He exhaled slowly. We met a few times. There it was. Simple. Direct. Final. That I nodded, not because I accepted it, but because I understood it. Every missing piece had just fallen into place. The late nights, the distance, the way he carried himself like someone divided between two lives. And you didn't think I deserved to know that? I asked. I didn't want to hurt you, he repeated, the same line. The same empty reasoning. You already did, I said, without raising my voice. That he looked at me like he expected more. Anger. Tears. Something loud enough to match the situation. But I didn't have that in me anymore. Whatever would have come out like that had already been replaced by something colder. What did you tell her about us? I asked. That he hesitated again. That hesitation felt almost routine now. I told her things weren't great, he said. That I let out a small breath. Things weren't great, or you stopped trying? He didn't answer. And that silence felt like agreement. That's when it really settled in. Not just what he had done, but how he had justified it. He didn't see this as a sudden mistake. He saw it as something that grew out of a gap he believed already existed. And instead of closing that gap, he filled it somewhere else. You shared parts of yourself with her that you stopped sharing with me, I said. That it wasn't a question. It was a realization. I didn't mean for it to happen like that, he replied, but his voice lacked conviction. It doesn't matter how it was meant to happen, I said. It matters that it did. There was a pause, but this time it felt different. Not heavy, not uncertain. Just empty. That I studied his face, trying to find something familiar, something that reminded me of the person I thought I knew. But all I saw was someone who had made choices I wasn't part of. Do you love her? I asked. That question seemed to hit him harder than the others. He looked away, running his hand through his hair like he needed time. I don't know, he said, the same answer. The same uncertainty. But this time, it didn't affect me the way it did before, because now I understood something I hadn't before. It wasn't about her. It wasn't even about love. It was about the fact that he had allowed himself to create something outside of us, and in doing that, he had already stepped out of what we were. I nodded slowly. That's enough. What do you mean? He asked. I mean, I don't need to hear anything else. For the first time, I saw something shift in his expression. Maybe it was realization. Maybe it was the moment he understood that I wasn't reacting the way he expected. "I'm sorry," he said. That I looked at him, really looked this time, and tried to feel something when he said it. But it didn't land the way apologies are supposed to. It felt late. Not because of timing, but because of intention. "Are you sorry because you hurt me?" I asked, "or because now you have to deal with it?" He didn't answer. And that told me more than anything else could have. The room felt different now. Not tense, not overwhelming. Just final. Like something had reached its natural end, even if neither of us had said it out loud yet. "I kept thinking I was losing you," I said quietly. "But the truth is, I already did." He looked at me, like he wanted to say something that would fix it, something that would pull everything back to where it was before. But there are moments where words lose their power. And this was one of them. "I didn't plan this," he said. "I know," I replied. "That's what makes it worse. Because it meant this wasn't one bad decision. It was a series of small ones. Choices made over time. Moments where he could have stopped, could have turned back, but didn't. That I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of everything settle into something solid. Something undeniable. "I'm not going to compete with someone who shouldn't exist in our marriage," I said. "I'm not asking you to," he replied quickly. "But you already did," I said. "The moment you let her become part of this." He didn't have an answer for that. And I didn't need one. For the first time since this started, I didn't feel like I was searching for clarity. I had it. It wasn't comforting, but it was real, and that changed something inside me. "I think the hardest part," I continued, "is realizing that while I was trying to understand you, you were already building something else." He looked down, but I didn't stop. "I wasn't losing you to her," I said. "I was losing you to a version of yourself that stopped choosing me." That was it. That was the truth, and as I stood there, I realized something else. I wasn't breaking in that moment. I had already broken slowly, quietly, over time. This was just the point where I finally saw it clearly. "I can't unsee this," I said. That he nodded, like he understood, but I wasn't sure he did. Because understanding the words and understanding the weight behind them are two very different things. That night, something shifted in a way that couldn't be undone. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet, irreversible change. That I didn't feel like his wife anymore. Not in the way that mattered, and even though nothing around me had physically changed, I knew something fundamental had ended. The days after discovering the messages felt unreal. I moved through my routines the way people do when they're trying to function while their mind is somewhere else. Every familiar part of my life suddenly looked different. The house felt colder. Conversations felt forced. Even the quiet moments carried a weight that hadn't been there before. For 2 days I said nothing to my spouse about what I had seen. I needed time to think clearly. Reacting immediately would have turned the situation into a shouting match, and I didn't want anger to control what happened next. What I wanted more than anything was clarity, but pretending everything was normal became impossible. Every time my spouse checked their phone or stepped away to answer a message, the memory of those words came back. "I miss you already." Those 4 words had shattered years of trust in a matter of seconds. Eventually I realized the silence between us was worse than the truth itself. One evening after dinner, I asked if we could talk. My voice sounded calm, but inside my chest my heart was racing. My spouse looked surprised. We rarely had serious conversations anymore. For a moment neither of us spoke, then I told them I knew. The change in their expression was immediate. Confusion appeared first, followed by a brief flicker of panic. They asked what I meant, but the question sounded weak, like they already understood that I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse them angrily. I simply told them about the message I had seen and the conversation thread that followed. The silence that came afterward felt endless. Finally they exhaled slowly and looked down at the table. That was the moment I knew the truth was real. At first they tried to explain it away. They said it hadn't meant anything serious. They said it had started during a stressful period at work and had gotten out of control. They insisted it wasn't supposed to hurt anyone, but every explanation sounded smaller than the damage it had caused. I asked the only question that truly mattered: how long? The answer hurt more than I expected. The relationship had been going on for months. Almost the entire period when I had been noticing the distance between us, hearing that confirmed something painful. The loneliness I had been feeling hadn't been imaginary. While I was trying to understand why our relationship felt different, my spouse had already been investing their attention somewhere else. For a few minutes we talked honestly in a way we hadn't in a long time. But the conversation didn't repair anything. If anything, it made the reality clearer: trust had been broken, and some things can't simply return to the way they were. By the time the discussion ended, I understood something important. Staying in the marriage out of habit or fear wouldn't fix the damage. It would only prolong a situation that had already collapsed. So I made a decision that it wasn't dramatic or impulsive. It was calm, quiet, and deeply certain. That I told my spouse I couldn't continue the relationship. The words felt heavy as they left my mouth, but they also carried a strange sense of relief. For months I had been trying to ignore the growing distance between us. Now the truth had forced everything into the open. The next few weeks were difficult. Separating lives that had been connected for years is never simple. There were practical decisions to make, conversations with family, and moments where the reality of the situation hit harder than expected. But something surprising also happened during that time. Without the constant tension inside my home, I started feeling lighter, not happy exactly, but free from the confusion that had been weighing on me for so long. Through all of it, my neighbor remained quietly supportive. They never pushed themselves into my life or tried to take advantage of the situation. They simply checked in from time to time. Sometimes it was a short conversation outside. Other times it was a quick message asking how I was holding up. Those small gestures meant more than they probably realized. When someone experiences betrayal, it changes the way they see people. Trust becomes fragile. You start questioning intentions, wondering whether kindness is genuine or temporary. But my neighbor never gave me a reason to doubt them. Their support stayed steady and simple. They listened when I needed to talk and respected my space when I needed silence. Months passed, and life slowly began to feel normal again. That I focused on rebuilding routines that belonged entirely to me. Work became easier to concentrate on. Even the quiet evenings at home stopped feeling lonely. During that time, the friendship with my neighbor continued to grow naturally. What started as brief conversations over a fence turned into longer talks during evening walks. We shared stories about our past, our goals, and the strange ways life sometimes changes direction when we least expect it. There was never a moment where things suddenly shifted from friendship to something else. No dramatic confession or sudden realization. Instead, the connection deepened slowly. One evening while we were talking outside, I noticed something simple but meaningful. For the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely peaceful, not distracted. Not worried about hidden truths. Just present in the moment. That realization made me smile. A year earlier, I would have never imagined how much my life would change because of something as small as a friendly greeting from the person next door. The betrayal that once felt like the end of everything had quietly pushed me toward a completely different path. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't see at the time. Sometimes the people who hurt us reveal the truth we've been avoiding. And sometimes the kindness of someone unexpected becomes the steady ground that helps us stand again. All it took was a neighbor who cared enough to listen, and that simple kindness ended up changing my life in ways I never could have predicted.